Hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Northern Pass. I'm Heather McLean, and today I'm being joined by the Honorable Paul Simard, a former House Representative in the New Hampshire state government. How are you today, Paul?
Doing very well, thank you, Heather.
Excellent. We're going to be discussing where some things have been happening in the government lately, New Hampshire state government, in reference to the Northern Pass, and how we are sort of going to be discussing a little bit about the lack of transparency in our government and the corporate influence possibly, and some other topics which I think Paul might fight that he likes to share with you. So,
okay.
There's a lot going on. Why don't I just start with what we were discussing right before the camera went on, which was we had been discussing, I've talked to a lot of people, and there's a varying degree of education in the public on what happens behind closed doors or with the public in regards to the Northern Pass. And some people have actually said to me, you know, why, if everybody is saying they don't want the Northern Pass, which there have been thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people and more gaining every day saying, we don't want the Northern Pass, and yet they don't even, nothing has changed. Northern Pass is business as usual. So can we discuss maybe why that's happening?
Sure. Northern Pass is a project, and it's known as an elective project. All right. There are two types of projects, and these are classified by the ISO. The ISO runs the grid for New England. ISO has determined that Northern Pass is elective. The other type of project is one that's required for reliability. This is not a required project. This project is elective, and it's for profit only. And I think you have to keep that behind this whole thing. The state of New Hampshire doesn't have a comprehensive energy policy. It does have an energy policy that was formulated about 10 years ago, and that energy policy was formulated by the utilities.
Okay.
So where they consider it comprehensive, it's not really. It's comprehensive as far as the business aspect is. It stems from back in the 70s when Seabrook nuclear plant was a big item, where Aristotle Onassis was trying to put an oil port into Portsmouth to receive oil. And at that time, there was a lot of opposition, the Seashell Alliance and so forth. So politicians enacted a series of laws that would enable the state to build energy producing or transporting facilities, and it established a procedure that could be expedited with government oversight only. That precluded participation by you and I or towns, municipalities.
Okay.
So when Northern Pass wants to come through, they had envisioned a process where they would just use their own rights-of-way for existing lines, and where they didn't have those rights-of-way, they were going to use eminent domain to achieve their goals.
Okay.
So in the previous session, I served in the last session of the legislature. In the previous session, in the last session, beginning of last session, we did pass a bill that precluded public service from using eminent domain for an elective project.
Correct.
Okay. So
one good thing that's happened.
one good thing.
Oh, one good thing. Okay.
All right. So after public service looked at that roadblock, they figured, well, we'll go and we'll buy this property that we need to finish that one leg of northeast Northern Pass. They have been attempting to purchase those properties, and to a varying degree of success. They've spent a lot of money on property, but they have yet to connect. So that hasn't happened. And they have investors in this project, and the investors are getting pretty impatient at this point.
Okay.
All right. So at the end of last session, there was a bill that was passed. It was House Bill 361, and it established a commission. And that commission was to study the viability of using state-owned rights-of-way
Right.
to put underground cable. Well, first, there was the feasibility of using the state rights-of-way, and then the second part of it was, is it feasible to underground Northern Pass? The commission was headed by Senator Forrester, and I've got to give her kudos for what she did.
Yeah,
because
she's truly a people's senator.
yes, she is.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Yes, she is. And
We love you.
you know, one of the things, senators get paid $200 a year, just like representatives. But
Okay.
where there are only 24 senators,
Correct.
it's a sought-after position, and they spend a lot of money to get that position. In this area, it's right around $100,000 for a $200
For campaign
job.
funds
Okay.
that they have to get from other people.
Some of the stances that Senator Forrester has taken are hampering her in her fundraising abilities. And I'm not going to say that the utilities are big benefactors of senators, but yes, they are.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I backtrack for just a moment
Sure.
before we move on? Going back to when you said these laws were put into place that enabled the utility companies to take eminent domain and to use their rights of ways. I just want to revisit that for a moment.
Okay.
That was done in the New Hampshire state government, but it was probably overseen by the utility companies. That's kind of what did they send their lobbyists in? Did they,
At the last hearing for Senate Bill 99, the front row
was all
in the hearing
lobbyists?
was all lobbyists.
Okay, so this is
Okay?
important.
There are a lot of high-paid lobbyists
Right.
that work for public service, that work for Northeast Utilities. Okay?
So they're infiltrated and they concentrate on the senators.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. They
Absolutely.
concentrate on the senators. Their lobbyists are paid, the senators are only paid $200 a year. We know one very popular, or I should say unpopular lobbyist is Donna Gamache. I constantly see her. She acts like she runs the State House. You don't have to say anything. This is my opinion. Okay, but she is there all the time overseeing what's going on with PSNH. But what kind of power do they have? All they can do is go in and speak to these senators. They can't tell them what to do, can they?
No, they can't tell them what to do, but when they make their campaign contributions, that guarantees them access to these senators. Now, if it costs me $100,000 to get elected and I want to run for another term, I've got to line up funding.
Okay.
Okay, so if I tell Donna, I don't like your line, I don't like you, I don't like Northeast Utilities, go away. There's a lot of funding that I'm probably going to lose.
Right.
Okay, so there's, these people are motivated by public service, above all, and I think most of them have good intentions, but they have to get there first. And in order to get there, they have to trade something.
They trade something, and so therefore they're no longer working for the people.
They're not solely
They're
working
not
for the people.
working for the.
Yeah.
That's the point I want to bring out. Okay.
Yeah. Their constituency involves, more than just the district that they come from. Their constituency
Right.
is also those who make campaign contributions.
So the utilities way back when had influence on these bills. Okay.
Absolutely.
And influence enough in the government that these bills were made to favor their development.
I don't know if you remember Seabrook.
Yeah, I do. Oh.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
And what went on when Seabrook was originally approved? Governor Thompson was in the State House, and Governor Thompson was never one to use a fly swatter when he had a bazooka handy.
Right.
All right. It's just, so these laws all came about at that time.
Okay.
The SEC, the Site Evaluation Committee, it's made up of, let's see, on the 361 we had Susan Slack, Department of Energy, Karen Ratamaki, Commissioner of Administrative Services, Michael Pillsbury, Department of Transportation, Tim Drew, Department of Environmental Services, Tom France, Director of the New Hampshire PUC, all right, Steve Hamilton, Property Appraisal, and Bino LaMontagne from DRED. These people all come from agencies that are directly involved with the SEC, the Site Evaluation Committee, okay? The PUC and the Attorney General's office, I can tell you from my battles with smart meters that the co-op is installed in this area. Are you familiar with the smart meters?
No, I'm afraid I have one.
Yeah.
Can we have them taken off?
Well,
I think you
we
have to
passed
pay.
a law that said before they install smart meters on your home, they must obtain written consent.
Okay.
Did the co-op ask you to sign a form?
No, because I'm with PSNH, so I don't know what
Good for you.
happened
But most people up here, they had no idea what was going on. And, you know, it's an amazing thing with the co-op. These are smart meters. A smart meter definition includes if a meter communicates, then it is a smart meter.
Okay.
All right? But the co-op insists that their meters are not smart, that they do not fit the definition, because they said they don't have a Zigbee chip in the meter itself.
Yeah.
These meters communicate. What happens is I think it's every 10 homes, one meter communicates with the next and the next and the next, and the last one on the line communicates to a repeater, and that repeater communicates to the home office. These things clearly communicate. Okay?
Okay.
But they say no, they're not smart, they don't communicate, you know, they just report what. Well, they obtained $15 million from the federal government to buy these meters. And the government,
coming out of our tax
the
money.
federal government, okay, has a
That
whole
annoys me.
program to establish a smart grid.
Oh.
The smart grid is based on smart meters.
Right.
But the co-op says their meters are not smart. If their meters are not smart, seems to me they need to pay back the federal government the $15 million that they obtained
I like your
on a
thinking.
false premise.
Yeah.
Okay? But anyways, I get back to the PUC,
Yes.
okay, and the AG's office. When I was filing complaints with the Consumer Protection Division of a gentleman by the name of James Buffetti, but I didn't mention any names, okay? He is Consumer Affairs, and we brought this to his attention. We brought spec sheets, cut sheets on these meters, explained the capabilities these meters had, and said, look, these are clearly are smart meters. What he did was went back to a fellow by the name of Mark Dean. Mark Dean was an attorney. He's a lobbyist for the co-op. Mark Dean wrote Mr. Buffetti a letter saying, oh, these meters are not smart meters. They don't fit the definition. And, you know, these people have no claim.
Okay.
The AG's office said, yeah, he's right. No claim, sorry. We appealed to the PUC. The PUC said, well, the co-op is not a regulated utility.
Oh.
They are a regulated utility in terms of safety and reliability. Every utility in the state is answerable to the PUC on those two grounds. Just because the PUC doesn't set their rates doesn't mean the co-op is not a regulated utility. But the PUC and the AG's office threw this ball back and forth and claimed neither of them had jurisdiction. In the meantime, the co-op finished installing 83,000 meters, and it's a done deal. Okay?
Okay.
So when we're talking about Northern Pass,
Right.
and we're talking about the state agencies in this state are an entity answerable to no one except themselves. All right? Take Health and Human Services. We mandated that the medical care program, that everybody who was on Medicaid would have a primary physician that would refer them to different tests and different doctors and keep people healthy before they come in and to an emergency room and say, oh, I need help, I need help. We mandated that almost 3 years ago. Still hasn't been implemented because the departments and the agencies and the lobbyists for those agencies, they don't want to budge. They don't want it. We should have had $14 million in savings in health care in this state. People should have been enjoying the benefit of having comprehensive medical care. That all went by the boards because these agencies and these lobbyists have the power to stop that action.
Okay, so that is case in point. What we have is the government and the utilities can override all the people who are against it. And so, one thing, before we segue back to SB 99, right?
Okay.
That's what it is. I just want to point out that these former laws were for generally when the utilities were regulated, and they were putting out projects to keep the lights on. So they were kind of needed to keep the grid going, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then when they deregulated the energy companies, so the Northern Pass is like a new hybrid project where it's a for-profit, and then now they didn't change any of the laws yet to really match that project.
Correct.
Okay.
Northern Pass is its own legal entity.
Okay. But they're still trying to use the same laws to just put their
To bull their projects through.
That's my exact point, okay? Because Elizabeth Dragon from Franklin got up there and whined and moaned, I can say that because it's my opinion, again, in the State House, that the Northern Pass was, being picked on, and their town was being picked on. Of course, they don't care about the rest of the state. I know that. Anyway, but she said that the senators were not allowed to change the rules in the middle of them getting their, millions of tax dollars. But the truth is that Northern Pass is not the same kind of project as when those rules were in place. And so the laws need to change to protect the people from overzealous developers.
People need to have a voice in what goes on.
That's correct.
Towns need to have a voice in what goes on. The state needs to establish rules to govern these projects. We have no rules.
We have no rules right now.
The state of Vermont has enacted rules. Their transmission lines need to be buried. The state of Maine has enacted rules. Those rules state that, number one, they must demonstrate a benefit to the people of Maine prior to the approval of any project.
Right. Well, they can't find a benefit yet.
New Hampshire says, we're wide open. Come and put your lines any place you want. Come put your windmills wherever you please. We're wide open. Come and do what you will.
Yeah.
And that is wrong.
And it is so wrong.
Correct.
Okay, I couldn't agree more, because there are so many people I see that respond to some of the articles that are down in Concord in that area, like, oh yeah, well, we need this, renewable energy.
We get the NIMBY.
You're going to complain no matter what we do, but they're not sitting on that line, and their house isn't going to lose $100,000 that could have been their retirement.
Yeah. I've been accused of being a NIMBY, not in my backyard, okay? And my response to that is New Hampshire is a net producer of electricity.
Right.
We produce more electricity than we use. All right, we've got these windmills going up, and I'm all for renewable resources, but when you look at what's happening, that electricity is going to Massachusetts, it's going to Rhode Island, it's going to Connecticut, and they're accusing us of being NIMBYs.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell you, the day I see 90 windmills on Cape Cod is the day I will say it's all right for you to put your windmills on the top of our mountains. But the fact is, they are not doing this to their own state. The Cape Cod is their tourist industry. The White Mountains are our tourist industry.
We are too.
They're destroying our natural resources. They're destroying our way of generating income and making a living. But that doesn't apply to them. And we're NIMBYs up here in New Hampshire?
Right.
I don't think so.
Right.
And by the way, Elizabeth Dragon, people know her well up here in Plymouth. She was up here in Plymouth as a town official, and she liked to spend money. She was a town official in my town, Bristol, New Hampshire. She liked to spend money. Now she's down in Franklin, and they will receive a 40% increase in their revenues should they get Northern Pass. She has a direct economic benefit
Oh,
to be
absolutely.
derived from going down to Concord and testifying in favor of Northern Pass. So, I get a discount everything she says because she's got a motive to push that project.
Well, it's also, they kind of got up on the podium, it was her and another guy, and he was like, oh, I just, I have, I'm sick of watching all these, people suffering because we can't have the Northern Pass. Like, we're not going to suffer if we have the Northern Pass, So anyway, it made me so annoyed.
And with the Northern Pass, for every 200, and this was testimony that was given in front of the 361 Commission, for every 200 megawatts that they transmit over Northern Pass, you will see in your bill 1/10 of a cent on your kilowatt
There you
hour
go.
charge. So
Thank you very much.
we're really receiving the benefit from this.
Yeah, they don't know how little benefit it's going to be. They
Absolutely.
figure if it's going to be 1 cent off your bill, that's the benefit, and that's
Yeah.
what they can say.
It
All right.
it doesn't help us.
It doesn't help us.
us.
Okay, so now we have to go back to SB 99 because we really segued away from that. And I know George, our producer, might have a question. Do you want him to go with the SB 99 for a moment and then come back to your question? Because I know you have one.
99.
Okay, let's go to
Okay,
99.
SB 99, there was a hearing that was held, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, down in the State House. I know people from Windwatch hired a bus, we all went down together to testify. There were so many people to testify, they limited all the testimony to 3 minutes. People got up and they poured their hearts out.
Poured their hearts out. I was there. That
They
was-
submitted written testimony.
Yes.
The senators collected the written testimony. I testified. Senator Odell repeatedly asked people who testified, and do you know of any other industry that's ever had a moratorium slapped on them? And I don't know if you remember, but I was a little upset, and I just pointed my finger at him and I said, Senator Odell, I worked in the construction industry at the end of the 80s and early 90s, and I know for a fact moratoriums were slapped on the construction industry, on the condominium development industry. I told him, I said, it was a tough thing to go through. It was terrible. But we did it, and in the long run, well, maybe it was the right thing. What 99 did was placed a 1-year moratorium on wind and power projects, transmission projects. 1 year so that we could hopefully get a comprehensive program together for the state of New Hampshire to protect our interests. So, I'll let you take it from there. You were a witness to what went on, right?
Well, what I'll tell you is that this testimony went on for how many hours? Like from 1 o'clock until...
I'd say about 3 hours, yeah.
Actually, it was more like it went until at least 5 or 6 o'clock. I mean, it was at least 4 hours of testimony, I think.
I left. I left
Okay.
because
Right, but everybody, can you imagine, I don't know how, there were so many people that testified and so many people that didn't testify that were in there. And I know that it was just like completely discounted once they went to vote for it. It was like there was no possibility that was ever going to happen because you have people in there like, I'll mention again, Jeb Bradley, who, in my opinion, is completely bought and paid for by PSNH or Northeast Utilities and North Utilities East. That he's just one of the players, and I personally, in my opinion, think he might have said some untruths.
I don't doubt it. And, as I was saying before, it costs so much to run for the Senate that they rely on contributions.
Yeah, he's kind of blatant.
And, I don't know where he's going to fit into the next election
I don't
and
know.
where he's going to set his sights. But I do know that there was a lot of influence. I know the lobbyist sat behind me while I spoke. They sat with their arms folded. They didn't say a word because they knew the fix was in.
They knew the fix was in.
The fix was in.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. That's
Right.
exactly what happened. So,
Yeah. And then out of that, there was one other law, SB 175, okay, that I am interested in. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this.
I wasn't, I'm
Okay.
not sure if I was there for the 175. Which one was
I
that?
wasn't there for it, but it's the one where they can, certain entities can string like wires or poles across public lands and waters. Are you familiar with that?
State.
This
Yeah.
is talking
Yeah.
about, I believe, the Connecticut River, and this
Yeah.
is directly benefiting Northern Pass.
Exactly.
And it
And
was,
so if that's the case, Jeb Bradley lied because he swore up and down in that room. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Okay, but what he said was this has nothing to do with the Northern Pass. This has to do with
Fiber optic cables.
fiber optic
telephone
cables.
lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem with it is it says certain entities. It does not say telecommunication or anything like that. And if that's the case, Northern Pass is going to
Yeah.
take that little statement and say we're a certain entity.
yes.
And we have a
and they
pole or
do
a wire.
that. They'll get an attorney, and the
Yeah.
attorney will actually
Yes.
pull the testimony from a hearing
Right.
and say, look, this is what was intended by that law. It was stated at the hearing, and that is the intent of the
Right.
law, and we and they'll use that. They will use that.
This is where I'm concerned because there are certain places that they can't get by right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you
I have
watch.
him on tape saying that it had nothing to do with the Northern Pass.
You have him on tape too.
I
Okay.
have him on tape.
He has him on
saying
tape.
that this bill has nothing to do with the Northern Pass. It's for
Yeah.
fiber optic cables and telephone
Okay.
only.
Well,
So this is what we've heard. We do have that particular statement on tape. So we're in case somebody comes back at me and says, you shouldn't have said that about Jeb Bradley. This is my opinion.
you were lucky that Donna Gamache didn't throw you out of the hearing.
Oh, she tried. She actually tried.
I mean, I got questioned an awful lot while I was on that Senate floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I also watched Donna go between some of the people up there, and I watched other people sitting texting each other
sure.
about Jeb Bradley, who, I'm not going to mention any names, but I saw certain people with their cell phones, and I could see, Jeb Bradley on their list, and Nick Lavasseur. I
Nick
saw
comes
him.
from Manchester, and
Yeah.
after one of the original hearings, he told me that he was going to drive Northern Pass through this state.
Right.
I didn't check him out and see what he's received for campaign contributions. One thing I wanted to bring back is to get back to Northern Pass, all right, and the
Let's
cost of
chill.
it. Northern Pass claims, well, right now it's $1.1 billion to string it overhead. And they were saying, oh, well, if we bury it, it's going to be 20 times the cost.
No, we know that's not true.
Well, this is testimony from Electric Transmission Alternatives for transmission between Canada and the United States. It was done by Len Zalata and Associates down in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And Northern Pass underground high voltage DC option, putting it underground would be 2.015 million, or 2.015.05 cents. So $2 billion as opposed to one. But they said the cost on this would be 20 times what it is to overhead it. Now, when you go to the DC, you only need to put 2 lines up rather than 3 for the AC. All right, when you go underground, right now they have technology that's available. They don't even have to put it in a conduit. They can lay this line right in a bed of sand. They don't have to put a pipe to run it through a pipe or anything.
So are you saying that they could bury it on the current right-of-way in that manner for this price, or are you saying it have to be on the
For
right-of-way?
this price, they could bury it.
But would it have to be on softened roadways? Would it have to be on the current state?
Not
roads?
necessarily.
So
Not according to this report. I mean, it's a
that
20-page
is
report.
interesting.
And,
Okay.
the underground application with the VSC, which is a process they use, HVDC technology was investigated for a 140-mile portion of Northern Pass. Leading supplier of HVDC technology was contacted to discuss estimated conductor costs and converter station costs for plus minus 325 kV line with about 1,100 MW of capacity. Now, Northern Pass is 1,200 now. Now, the 140 miles, and there's a little footnote on that.
Yeah.
Although the estimates are based on a capacity of 1,100 MV, that capacity is not an upper limit for feasibility, and a cost estimate for a line with somewhat greater capacity, such as 1,200 MV capacity, proposed by Northern Pass, would be very similar. Okay, so this 1,100, 140 miles Northern Pass out for an all-underground UG alternative using pricing assumptions consistent with other HVDC project for about 180 miles in length, 40 more miles, proposed by Northeast Utility in the past several years. The results are set forth in a summary table before. Land and right-of-way, 32 million. Route surveys, 4 million. Materials and transport, 721 million. Labor, 355 million. Engineering, 134 million. Administrative overhead, 11 million. Legal fees, 6 million. Finance costs, 433 million, and a contingency of 314 million for a total price of 2.01 billion. It's right here. This was supplied to the 361 Commission.
Okay.
We know it's true.
Okay. This is actually really big news because I was always under the impression that they wouldn't be able to do it on their current right-of-way, but you're saying they probably can.
And they could do it on their right-of-way if they buried it.
Right. If they bury
And
it.
if they bury it, there is less pollution in the air. There are
Of
less,
course.
it's better all the way around.
Right.
But they don't want to do it because they don't want to finance that extra $1 billion.
Yeah, well, they're only I guess, they're only going to make 40 billion. I mean, I guess they can't spare
Yeah.
another bill.
Well, they had the finance costs in there. I'm not sure what the term on that finance is, but finance costs $433 million, and it
Okay.
doesn't have the term of the finance. And I'm sure we probably heard it in the committee someplace, but it's feasible.
Now,
it's doable.
It's totally feasible, totally doable, and yet they're just outright lying about the feasibility of doing it.
It's the profit. The
Okay,
profit.
it's all the profit. So I wouldn't say, let's say they're not lying, okay? They're kind of, they're just saying it's too expensive. That's
Yeah.
all. So in essence, they're saying the truth to them, which it's too expensive, they don't want to spend the money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it's totally feasible to do
It's
it.
feasible, and that's one of the things we were charged with. Is it feasible?
Right.
Yeah, we heard from contractors, it is feasible.
But why, so now why haven't there been any movement on this and any force in this in as far as making laws are concerned so far? Is it because they're outnumbered?
It's politics.
So
it's politics.
They're outnumbered by, again, the people who are the senators who are working for the people.
Jeannie Forrester is
Yeah.
down there, and I'm sure she gets beat up on a daily basis because she's looking at the reality. They're looking at the political reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And, it's a sad thing to say.
So how can we help? I mean, what can we do?
What can we do? We can look at the people we put in the State House, number one. We can grill them.
Yeah.
Jeb Bradley was here at the college a few weeks back addressing the young Republicans. But there were also a lot of adults there. Look at the people you have running for office. Question them. Mm-hmm. Find out where they stand, and hold their feet to the fire once they're in. You know, when I was in, I was very accessible, and one of probably the biggest issue that I had from constituents, you know, emails and so forth, was the gay marriage, the repeal of the gay marriage. And the thing that amazed me is down in Bristol, I had more emails from residents of Bristol telling me not to repeal gay marriage, that they, you know, it was the right thing to do to keep gay marriage. And Holderness, I had a lot of people from Holderness that emailed me on a regular basis. Ashland, Bristol, you know, Alexandra, and it just, there are a lot of people that know what's going on. They do email, but there are a lot of people that go to work every day and try to pay their bills.
Right.
And
They don't want to think about it.
yeah.
They don't want to think about it, and they don't want to, and oftentimes, like the issue of the Northern Pass was certainly not a deciding factor for Maggie Hassan, I don't think. Because all she had to do was just say the right words, which had no intent to carry it through, which was, yeah, I don't agree with that, and I'd like to see it buried, but there's no force behind her statement. I think she's going to hang everybody out to dry.
I think you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Maggie Hassan, you know, in her campaign, came out and said how she balanced the budget in the previous session of the legislature. But in the session after that, I served in this last session, we faced an $800 million deficit. I know because we made $207 million in cuts in Health and Human Services. And there were dire predictions that old people were going to be thrown out into the street to die. There were predictions of sick people not getting care. All these bad things were going to happen. Well, you know what? We made those cuts, and those were hard cuts to make. And people are still being cared for. Those people who need essential services are still receiving those services. Every time we met, we had at least 40 lobbyists in that room. We had agencies. Agencies, that's their lifeblood. They're writing letters to the editor. They're shaping people's opinions. And by the end of that session, we balanced the budget. The state was in sound fiscal order. The new governor got in there, and we had made a 10% cut. The House made an 11% cut. Jeannie Forrester was influential in restoring some of the cuts that we had to make to balance the budget for Health and Human Services, for different programs that she deemed necessary. The Senate cut the budget by 10%, which was a 1% reduction in the cut that we made. All right, we balanced the budget. Even with that, we are still about $15 million in the hole right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Maggie Hassan came out with a budget that was based on $80 million worth of gambling revenue, and she had no qualms about it. When I was in college, I took Psych 101, and I had a professor, and that professor said that you can remember what a neurotic and a psychotic is because a neurotic builds castles in the sky, but a psychotic lives in those castles. Well, Maggie Hassan is living in a budget that she says has $80 million more than what the actual revenues are, and she will not face the truth.
Oh, that's where she wants the gambling to come in and say that
she's you know.
Yeah, I hear you.
With the highway tax.
That remains to be seen.
With the gas tax, we're gonna do this. We're gonna repair our bridges. We're gonna repair our roads.
Yeah.
What's the first thing she did? She went out and hired 15 new state troopers.
How about this, Paul? That everybody in the state of New Hampshire, when they fill up a gas can for their lawnmowers and their snowmobiles and their chainsaws and everything else that isn't used for the road, and they file their federal taxes, and they keep those receipts, and they start flooding in, then what?
You know, when you look, you know, there is a problem with our gas tax. There is a problem with our highway maintenance, okay? But what we're seeing now is vehicles that get a lot better gas mileage. We're getting more and more electric vehicles, And I'm going to tell you, in 10 or 15 years, the gas tax is not going to support our highways. We need to look at that. We can't just say, well, just raise the tax. That's going to solve the problem. That in itself will not solve the problem.
Yeah.
So, whether it be running a bus service up and down our highways, the highways are already there. We can buy buses, right? During the Olympics in London, all their buses were hydrogen powered. How do you create hydrogen? You run electricity through water. It releases the hydrogen.
Well,
Take the hydrogen, compress it, put it in a fuel cell in a bus, and run them up and down 93, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think there's, okay, we're going to have to switch the subject a little bit, but we can, that's another interesting subject.
Yeah, it is.
That's another, and George, did you have a question that you want to finish out this with? Did we touch upon everything?
My only question was, I had a question of why most times there are more lobbyists in the Senate committees than there are senators. I mean, you've got 10 senators sitting behind a table and you've got 15 lobbyists overseeing them, make sure they do what?
They're watching out for their interests.
Yeah, they're all texting each other, trust me. I was sitting up there, you wouldn't believe it. They're all like...
They should not be allowed in the Senate chambers.
Oh, and they're tweeting, too.
They should be allowed to contribute to their campaigns.
Yeah. They're
This
actually...
is a for the people, by the people government.
We need to look at it.
And they're actually tweeting out there, I noticed that.
Oh, sure.
And during the whole, the voting process.
Now, if you have a senator that's tweeting, that becomes part of the official record.
Right, I didn't see any senators tweeting.
Okay.
I saw the lobbyists.
Because I know, I sat in finance.
I can't say that was,
and I had one that used to sit next to me, and it was held under the table.
He got in trouble, that one of the representatives got in trouble for just that.
Well,
he didn't get in any trouble.
For every one that gets in trouble, you get 100 that don't.
He should have, actually, he didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Can I mention his name?
It's absolutely up to you.
Well, Nick Levasseur from, he was texting Donna Gamache. That was kind of, that was on, I think, on the record.
Yeah.
That might have actually been in the newspaper, I'm not sure.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, but that was way back in the beginning, way back. So we know where his interest lies. And so hopefully these guys aren't doing that so much anymore. They might be up in the pit. They're doing some texting, but I don't know that once they're down on the floor and they're doing voting, I didn't see anything going on like that. But this was like way back in the beginning, and there were witnesses.
And if you see that, you can ask to see it.
Yeah.
It's public record. That's part of the public record.
Well, yeah, we had people out in the audience who were sitting right next to seeing the whole thing going on. Anyway.
Hey, can I put in a plug?
Be my guest.
Saturday, we have Scott Brown coming up to Hanover, the Hanover Inn. And it's a Grafton County, and it's open to the public, $150. It gets a hospitality suite, a VIP suite. You spend an hour face-to-face with Scott Brown, and if you don't want to do that, there's a $50 luncheon, and we're going to have numerous people speaking.
Okay, where and what time?
Hanover Inn, 12 o'clock, Hanover, New Hampshire.
Okay, Hanover, New Hampshire.
Scott Brown.
Scott Brown.
This coming Saturday, the 20th.
Okay.
So it's open to the public. You don't have to be a Republican. Of course, we prefer that you would be, but it's open to the public.
So another question, if somebody wants to write to you or email you, do you want to give your email or do you want a contact address or no?
At this point, no, but I am going to run for the House again, and at that point, I'll have a new House address.
Gotcha.
And I'll be happy to do that. Right now, I get so many emails now that, just on my personal account that I could spend all day just on the computer and never catch up.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your information, and we will be back. Thank you.